Well, I think we're getting things started here. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Derek McGinty, and I'll be moderating our conversation on the possibility of an early redistrict in the state of Maryland. It's a very political subject and a very heated subject as well. Unless you've been hiding out in a cave for the last year or so, I don't need to tell you where we are as a nation or as a state. The Trump administration is making no secret of its desire to maintain power regardless of what rules have to be stretched or broken. So the president's encouraging red states to redraw their voting districts to favor more Republicans and perhaps hold on to the legislative majority they've got in the House, even in the presence of a so-called blue wave in November. So our question today is, should the state of Maryland fight back by doing the same thing? Joining us to discuss all of this is State Delegate C.T. Wilson, who sponsored House Bill 488, the early redistricting bill. Delegate David Moon is Majority Leader. Pete Smith is a member of the Arundel County Council, and Dr. Karen McRae is a board member of the Transformative Justice Coalition. And as we begin, we'll take a minute to hear from the person who organized this webinar for us today, Pastor Steve Tillett, a community leader and candidate for Maryland.
Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us on this citizens webinar to discuss the importance of Maryland playing her role in pushing back against the authoritarian overreach. We seem to have feedback. Give me a second. I'm sorry.
Mr. McGinty, you might need to touch your microphone off.
There we go.
Hear the pastor.
I'll take it from the top. Can you hear me? Yes, good. Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us on this citizens webinar to discuss the importance of Maryland playing her role in pushing back against the authoritarian overreach and attempted takeover of our next several elections by the federal government in our country. We find ourselves forced by national events to respond to the counter-constitutional mid-decade redistricting Donald Trump has demanded of compliant Republican governors and state legislatures. Maryland must meet the moment and take our place among the several states that are responding with redistricting plans of our own. We hope to inform you today and receiving some of your questions that you will then call your state senator, and especially the office of the president of the Maryland State Senate, Bill Ferguson, to insist that House Bill 488, which was passed by the House of Delegates last week, be allowed to come to the floor of the Senate for debate and a vote. That will require first that it is released by the Rules Committee, and there is a process for that. Fortunately, Senator Clarence Ellis, who is going to be joining us shortly, is the vice chair of that, and maybe he can help us understand how we can push to get that done. No one person should feel they have the right to ignore a bill passed by a supermajority of the House of Delegates because they personally disagree with it. Please make your wishes known by calling 410-841-3600. That's 410-841-3600. That's Senate President Ferguson's office. For those who ask the question, well, what does this really have to do with us? I would let you know, I would remind you that whoever controls the House of Representatives, in theory, controls the purse strings. And so that will determine whether ICE gets a blank check from the government or not, how much money and funding they get or not, how much is spent on your health care or not, protecting federal workers or not, being able to afford our energy supply or not. All of these things are tied to having some balance, some check and balance in our federal government. This will be tied in no small part to the success that other states are having and that Maryland needs to have in redistricting for a time such as this. Derek?
Thank you, Steve, who I should also note, full disclosure, he happens to be one of my fraternity brothers, Kappa Alpha Psi Incorporated. Delegate Wilson, can I start with you? Because you were the man behind the plan on this. And I wonder, what was your thought process going into this? And did you worry about the same thing happening that happened last time you guys tried to do this, which the court overturned it?
Again, thank you, and also thanks to Delegate Moon, because this was a heavy lift. I was on the governor's redistricting commission, and our job was to determine if we wanted to do mid-district redistricting, and then which maps we should choose. And again, I want to make this very clear: this is not a political stunt. This doesn't get done by just emoting in a 5-second video on Twitter or whatever, on any social media. This is months and months of research and hard work to make sure, number one, that we can do this and that we do it the right way. As an attorney, and Dave can say the same thing, the amount of research we've done to make sure, number one, that what happened in 2021 doesn't happen again. And so I'm extraordinarily confident that this map will pass constitutional muster. I believe the circuit court judge, which put a holding out that was not binding to anyone, I believe that holding was erroneous. And we do have the right to do it. And the Supreme Court made it very clear that that redistricting can be partisan. Otherwise, they would not put it in the hands of elected officials. So Maryland does not have anything in our Constitution that prevents us from not only mid-cycle redistricting or partisan redistricting. However, because we wanted to make sure that we were, crossing all of our T's and dotting all of our I's, this isn't just about partisan. And if you look at the map, it's much more competitive, not just for Republicans, but also for Democrats. So to make sure that we didn't run afoul of any legal issue or perceived legal issue, we drew the maps in the most fair way possible. So even that anyone who is elected is going to have to appeal to both sides of the fence in order to get on. As I've said many times on the House floor, my goal was to make sure that we had 8 elected officials from Maryland fighting this tyrannical regime. That was the focus. It wasn't Republican or Democrat. And as everyone who listen surely knows, Governor Hogan was one of the Trump's main opponents in his first 4 years. I believe there are Republicans out here who seeing the violations of our Constitution, our civil rights, and the direction this country is going, because we put it in the hands of billionaires and somehow thought that they had our best interest at heart. No, their job is making money. That's what they've done. That's what they've been doing. That's what they're going to do. So I have the utmost confidence that we're not going to run into that same issue because we did the work. Again, it's not about popping up on stage for a few seconds. It's about months and months of legal research to make sure that what you put forward is legally sound, and will pass constitutional muster.
Delegate, you say you're interested in providing pushback basically to Donald Trump, but I don't really understand how one seat is going to make that difference. And aren't you already in charge with 7 Democrats in the state anyway? Well,
as a former soldier, I'll tell you this: every soldier on that battlefield counts. So let's make it very clear: every soldier counts. I will never discount one vote. 2, to make it very clear, as he's already said, I said on my House floor debates that this president was going to try and steal the elections. The very next day, he went into Georgia to take the ballots for the 2020 election. Now, we all know that there's only a 5-year statute of limitations on election fraud. So the only reason he's doing now is practice. He wants to practice to see what he needs to do, what he falls short on, who needs to seize what. And if we don't believe that, we can look when he sent federal troops in LA and Chicago. When the court slapped that down, he stopped sending federal troops and started sending what? ICE. So he's learning from his mistakes. That's what this is for. And the reason one vote counts so much more is because he's going to go into all the swing states and he's going to take those ballots. So we need to make sure he's not just beaten in the swing states, that he's beaten in every state. So Maryland plays a part. And the last thing I'm going to do is sit back and be a victim, because that's the main thing people say. Well, what can we do? No, we're doing something.
Delegate Moon, I'd like to ask you a question. You had a bill, you were the author of a bill last summer that would require, if other states engage in out-of-cycle redrawing of their congressional districts, then Maryland would be required to do that as well. That was 7 months ago. I'm wondering how your views have evolved and what you think now.
Well, thanks for the question, and hopefully my internet connection is not choppy. But I will say this. I mean, I was trying to send early alarm bells 7 months ago saying, yeah, because Texas at the time, as you'll recall, was this. I had deja vu, and I said, wait a second, haven't we seen this movie before? And in fact, in 2003, Texas conducted a mid-decade redistricting. Folks might remember it from the news because it went down much the same as this one did. The Democrats fled the state. They tried to prevent a quorum from happening, and the Texas Republicans prevailed anyway. So as soon as I saw Texas trying to run the same play 20 years later, I said, Maryland, we better get ready. And this, to me, is just further evidence that we are not talking about a partisan issue here. We are talking about an issue of state equality here, because we cannot allow ourselves to be bullied around by large states like Texas, who decide to redraw lines whenever they want and cancel all of Maryland's votes out. And we all know why they are doing this. But I'm glad that Pastor Tillett actually flagged the underlying motive on all of this. Sure. The redistricting is about political control. But what is actually going on here? They are paying for the immigration enforcement by cutting health care and cutting food stamps and cutting 25,000 federal jobs out of the Maryland budget. I have a little Google Calendar reminder to bring this up so that I'm reminded of this every day, that the reason why all of this chaos is happening is because they're trying to cut taxes for the wealthy and to create the largest immigration enforcement budget in history. And the budget of ICE now exceeds the state of Maryland. I want you to think about that. This is no longer about criminals or anything of that nature. And all of this, as my friend C.T. Wilson likes to say, it's a flood the zone distraction from the robbery of the public treasury that is currently going on. And again, they did this in 2003. They did it again in 2025. And so I do believe 1 vote, 5 votes, it doesn't matter. If we do not act now, we are inviting Texas to do this again in 2043. And that is just not a position that I can accept. And the last thing I'll say about it is this: we did not enter into this task with any glee. Do not get me, do not get confused on this point. We did not want to do this, but they have brought this fight to us. And so in the bill that we passed, I want to be very clear about what it does and does not do. It passes a new map for 2026, but if we're going to use the map beyond that in 2028 or 2030, it gives that choice to the voters. And that is the proper place for this question to be held. So we did not do this lightly. We said this is a one-time emergency just for 2026. And after that, it is up to the voters to decide. So thank you for listening to this invitation and being a part of the pushback.
I think some of the objections, and I'll turn to Dr. McRae, the objections to this are we shouldn't sink down to the level of what they're doing. That, we are a good government state here in Maryland, and we have a good system, and we shouldn't mess it up by trying to do what the Republicans are doing. Dr. McRae, what do you think?
I agree with Delegate Moon. They brought the fight to us, and it's our responsibility to fight back. What we're talking about is the disenfranchisement of minority voters in particular. And what they've done in Texas and how California responded, other states, Maryland included, must respond as well. Because if we don't, then we give them carte blanche to continue to move minorities into certain districts so that their power is diluted. And then we park or pack Black and brown voters into smaller numbers of districts, which further dilutes their power. And comprehensively, it systematically weakens minority voting strength. And I think, we have to meet the game where it's being played. And Maryland, without a doubt, as the governor said, it's about our own democracy. If we allow this to go unchecked, it continues. They're showing their hand. Like Delegate Moon said, the taking of the ballots for 2020. ICE going into different jurisdictions in a comprehensive format is another ruse, I believe, so that when 2026, they're going to start 2028, they're going to start, and they're putting their pieces in play, their people in play, so that they can further intimidate and dilute voting power and strength. I mean, overall, if we look at this comprehensively, nationally, the Congressional Black Caucus, as an example, will lose more than a third of its membership if this continues going state to state to state. We have to fight where we are in Maryland. It's more than necessity. It's essential that we have a stake and fight.
Councilman Smith, I see you nodding over there. What's your thought?
You know, I am. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
I think for me, you know, I have listened and watched this conversation evolve over the last, certainly the last couple of years, as we've seen things at the federal level play out. And in a normal instance, I certainly, as a council member, we have no role in how the federal or the state are implicated and how they're going to execute their process. But certainly as a citizen and as a service member and as a leader in the county, I mean, I have certainly developed thoughts on how our district and our county will be impacted. And what I do want to say is, you know, as the last 8 years has shown us, since 2016 certainly, has shown us the scale of which, you know, the administration is willing to go to. I normally wouldn't be one advocating for redistricting at this moment. I really wouldn't. But what I've seen transpire over the last, you know, 8 to 10 years, has shown me that if we don't become a part of the conversation, we will lose our ability to be effective at the table. And so what the House has done, I certainly applaud. I think it is a necessary action to take place, considering what's happening throughout the country. And let's not ever forget, we are a United States of America, not just United States of Maryland. And so what we do in Maryland also impacts the rest of the country. I'm a numbers guy. We have 218, there are 3 that are going to resign here shortly, but 218 Republicans and 214 Democrats in the House. And so you said, you know, what does this one mean? That one matters because if you get one, if we lose one seat, we're further along in the process of trying to make sure families have the resources to be successful when it comes to housing, when it comes to healthcare and other elements. And so I understand why the governor is trying to ensure that Maryland is doing its part to ensure the country is on the right track. And I sympathize with him, and I certainly support his efforts to do that. It is the right thing to do to be a part of this overarching conversation, which is why I'm certainly supportive of the delegates and the path that they have chosen to go down.
Delegate Wilson, I want to go to Pastor Steve in a minute, but you raised your hand.
Because I of course I agree with everything being said, but I don't want people to miss this moment, because look what's happening in our nation. Look what's happening to African American history, how they're taking African American history out of the Smithsonian, how they're forcing the national parks to remove all vestiges of Harriet Tubman, the derogation of our Black community and our heritage. And at that same moment, they're going and renaming military posts after seditious, traitorous Confederate generals. I want to make sure that people understand that this isn't just a Maryland thing. This impacts all of us. Look at the African-American unemployment rate, especially how the African-American female unemployment rate is double. I have 3 daughters, 3 little Black girls, and they don't deserve what is coming to them. And the problem is most of it's already here, and it's being done so quickly. I always say this president floods the zone. So you forget, we've already forgotten about the Obama post. We've already forgotten about the way they took Jackie Robinson, any information of his military history out, how they've scrubbed the record books. You can't go online and find anything about the Black combat veterans, the different units that fought World War I, World War II. They have gone out of their way to destroy my people and what we do. And we don't even, and that's before we get into the violation of everyone's civil rights. And again, while they look like they're targeting Hispanics, as you all well know, most of us African Americans, we are a swath of color, and nobody I know carries around their proof of citizenship. They've made it very clear they're going to send ICE through all the polls as a form of intimidation. They're stopping people and violating their Fourth Amendment rights. They're pulling them out of vehicles. Their First Amendment rights. They're going after individuals who even speak against this administration. And I am shocked, even at my Republican colleagues, especially individuals in the Senate, that we're supposed to just stand by and be helpless because, as you said, it's just one vote. At the end of the day, if you're in a bar fight that you didn't start, you can hide under the table. You're still going to catch that butt whooping. The best thing to do is stand up, square your shoulders, and start swinging. And you cannot guarantee a victory, but you can guarantee one hell of a fight. And that's what the House came to do, to fight. That's what citizens need us to see, that we're going to fight this administration. We're not going to stand by quietly because it might just be one vote. Every vote counts. Every soldier on this battlefield counts. And we were elected to fight for our people. And that's what we as the House intend to do.
Pastor Steve.
Yeah, thank you. Feedback. Okay. I want to co-sign what Delegate Wilson said. You saw me laughing, but that's true. I was just going to say, if somebody's hitting you, you're not going to say, "Please stop hitting me." That's not nice. We should be able to get along as you get your butt whipped. No, they started this. We need to finish it. And that's why I appreciate California. Texas tried to steal 5 more seats. California said, "I see your 5. Missouri is trying to steal 1. Maryland needs to say, "We see your 1." And then whatever it is that Florida or Ohio or North Carolina try to do, Illinois, New York, and Virginia need to say, "I see your," and maybe even, "and raise you." The future of this country is to say, people, I think, are missing what's happening in real time. And the threat, of course, affects us locally. You heard the conversation about how many jobs have been lost in Maryland because they are trying to eviscerate the federal government. And of course, a lot of the things they're doing are going to harm us greatly. And you take scientists and meteorologists away from NOAA, so you can't accurately predict the weather. You take scientists and physicians out of NIH and FDA and the like, so that you don't know what diseases are on the rise. South Carolina, for instance, they have a measles outbreak. Why did they have a measles outbreak? Forgive me, because they have a moron in charge of HHS telling people they don't need to inoculate their children. And now you can't even get the word out about it. So in order to push back and to say, no, we're not going to allocate billions and billions of dollars to mass thugs who a year ago were probably incarcerated for rioting at the Capitol, but instead we're going to use that money to pay for things that benefit the American people, to pay for health care, to pay for all the issues that all of our constituents, for those of us who are on this call, the 2 delegates who are on the call, the councilman is on the call, I'm running for state senate, my future constituents, we need to be able to provide for them. And the only way we can do it is push back. We can't say you shouldn't do it this way. And I'll close with this. In my core, and Councilman Smith said it, in my core, I do not like this at all. Gerrymandering, I've never liked it. Certainly mid-decade redistricting, that's beyond the pale. But you have to play the game that's being played. And the courts have allowed it, not just now, but they have allowed gerrymandering for political purposes for years. I think that's wrong. But until there's some agreement between the 2 parties, the right wing and the left wing, it takes 2 wings for the plane to stay in the air. The 2 parties buy a vowel and get a clue and decide that protecting our constitutional republic is more important than what advantage you personally can get for yourself by putting these voters out of your district and getting those in so your election prospects are easier. It has to become about we and not about me.
Well, Steve, I'll point out that some states have taken the high road. I think Indiana decided not to. Their governor said, we're not doing this. So some states have decided that they aren't going to do it. They aren't going to take part. And I'm wondering, are you worried that you're going to pull them off the sidelines by getting involved in this? Delegate?
Again, the bully tactics are infuriating because we're being told by the right that, oh, if we do this, other states might. So are you telling me that if we don't do this, that the Carolinas aren't, that all the other states aren't going to do it? Because that's simply not true. Okay, sitting here and trying to hold us hostage Now, I know Indiana, I know some of the individuals in Indiana, they chose not to do that, but they've already done it in Missouri. They've already done it in, I think, in Texas. They're getting ready to do it in Florida. They've already done it in, I think, South Carolina, North Carolina. So we're already behind the power curve. So to be very clear, to say that is a very that's a misgiving to say that, well, we're starting a fight, because that's what they want us to keep doing. Because as Democrats, that's what we tend to do: back away and say no, no, no. But as I've said, Democrats are fighters. They haven't seen us fight yet, but they're starting. Because there's no way I'm going to sit back on a promise that if we stand down, the other state's going to stand down. They started the fight. It makes zero sense to believe that somehow, some way, that we have to do the right thing, otherwise the other states won't. Absolutely not. That is not the way it's meant to be.
Well, you have a problem, and that is in the Senate, the leadership is saying that they will not even bring this to a floor vote. And I'm wondering, what are the strategies for dealing with that, or do you really have anything realistic that can be done? Who wants to take that?
I'll start. Number one, we do our job first. That's what the House did. We created a bill. We put those clauses in there to make sure that their voters will have a voice. And now, obviously, it's the citizens who have to lean on the Senate, because our strategy was to do the right thing. I can't force anybody else to do the right thing. I believe we've approached this with moral clarity. We have principled reasoning in what we're doing. So at this point, our first obligation was to do the right thing. Now, everybody listening, they have an obligation, because I can only call my senator one time. They have an obligation to let the Senate know exactly what this state wants, because I don't believe that the House has we haven't gotten it in front of our skis. I believe that Marylanders want us to fight. Now, Marylanders have to show the Senate that we want to fight.
Steve, I see you nodding.
Yes, you do. I'm nodding because at this point, the outcome rests with the citizens of Maryland. And right now you have one man, the president of the Senate, who has decided that he does not want this to happen. And I get it to a certain extent. He's concerned, for instance, about what might happen in the courts, what the courts might decide. But here's the thing. The courts are pretty much saying, this is a legislative thing, you all handle it. And so what they're doing is you saw what Texas did, they let them do it because a majority of the supermajority in the Supreme Court supports that. So when California comes back and does the same thing, what's their argument? Well, you can't do that because what? So Missouri has done it. What will their argument be to us to say, well, no, Maryland, Missouri can do it, California can do it, Texas can do it, but you can't.
Well, just so, because you can, maybe it doesn't mean you should.
I don't think that the legal court's argument is going to hold because of the season we're in. And we have, frankly, the worst Supreme Court that we've had since the Dred Scott Court. And we see the damage that they've caused. But they will not have any, I shudder to use the term moral authority because I don't see much moral in what they do. But the legal standing to say yes here, no here, yes here, no here. They're just going to have to let it all go. So since that's probably not going to be the case, what do? We need to play our part. We need to play our part because one vote can make the difference. And I would rather we do this now and then try to get back to things the way they should be in 2030, this decennial census 2032, when the new redistricting comes out. I would prefer that. I would prefer it. But for now, if we want to try and save our democratic republic, we're going to have to fight with everything we've got. And what we're asking people to do is to get on the phones and you call your member of the Senate and tell them what your wish is. And you call the Senate president's office and you tell them what your wish is, what your demand is. And you call the chairwoman of the Rules Committee, and her name escapes me. I'm sure one of the delegates can give us that, because she is the chair of the committee. Quick note on the Rules Committee. The Rules Committee is comprised of the chairs of all chairs and co-chairs, vice chairs of all of the committees in the Senate. Who controls their appointment to those positions? The Senate president. And so there's a fear factor. But I got to tell you, he only has one vote. It takes 21 for a majority in the Senate, and 15 of them look like the people on this call. So I'm wondering why people don't stand up and say, we will support the will of our constituents. We will push this out of the Rules Committee so that it has a discussion on the floor and it comes up for a floor vote, and the chips will fall where they may. But what we will not do is just act like people aren't talking and do nothing, and then come one vote short come November election results, assuming they don't try and mess that up and we get to have elections, and then keep doing what they're doing. Because if that happens, the experiment known as the United States of America will probably be over. And I don't know about you, but I've got I've got my 13-year-old baby girl. I've got 2 grandsons. I can't let this country go up like that without a fight.
I want to let Councilman Smith get back in here for a second.
I'll be brief. I just want us to remember at the end of the day what Congress's job is. Congress's job is simply to be, not simply, but to also be a checks and balance to the other executive branch, other parts of the government. Right now, there is a car that is driving, 100 miles an hour, and it has no brakes on it. And having a mechanism, a proper running government to ensure that those brakes can be pressed at an appropriate time is super important for democracy. And so the reason this is so important is because that side of the government 100% has not been providing a check and balance to the executive branch, which has been running sort of unchecked for certainly the last year and potentially for this upcoming year. And if there's no effort to provide that balance, we're going to continue to go down this path that leads us to a place that I think it's going to be really hard to come back from.
I just want to note that we got a note in our comments section that says Senator Katie Fry Hester is the chair. So Steve was asking about that. And I want to also encourage anybody who is online and listening to us to ask questions if you've got them, or make a comment, and we will bring it up on the air. Okay. I'm sorry. Delegate Wilson, you wanted to say something.
Well, and I just want to clarify 2 things. Firstly, while the Supreme Court under Rucho did say that this was left to the states, I want to be very clear. Leaving it to the states doesn't mean that each and every state can do political gerrymandering, because many states, including Florida, have a rule. I think in 2010, they passed a law that says they cannot draw political boundaries, legislative boundaries for political reasons. So they actually have a rule in place that Maryland doesn't. We do have we do have, our Constitution is basically silent on this, and except for the free and fair elections clause of our my mind is blanking right now, but we have a free and fair election clause, which I think they're leaning heavily on. But it's not smooth sailing for each and every state, merely because the Supreme Court has opined that there is no justicable question that they can answer. They made it clear that the states themselves can regulate that. Secondly, most if we're all familiar with the Epstein files, and we can talk forever about that right now, but the Epstein files, those were released because they were petitioned out, because everybody can force leadership to actually force a vote on the floor of the House or the Senate to push a bill out with a requisite number of signatures. And I believed in the House, it was 218 signatures that were needed to force those Epstein files out, and that was done. The Senate has the same rules as the House. We all have a way to petition, ergo, enough senators sign on to a petition. So instead of, again, any kind of political maneuvering or, trying to get political attention, if they're really serious, if those individual senators are really serious, instead of just sending tweets about how they support it, they can start a petition. If they really believe what they're saying, then they should act on it, because they can start a petition to force this to a vote on the Senate floor if they so choose. So if one of those senators tell you thumbs up, you should be asking them, okay, well, where's the petition and is your name on it? Because again, it's not just a political stunt to sit here and say we're fighting for our democracy because it's easy. It's also, we have rules and procedures in each body that can force a vote. They can do it or they can't. That's on them if the senator choose not to. But don't let anybody just tell you that they're supporting you or send out a very supportive message on social media. No. They can act too. And I have great respect for our Senate president. I understand his fears. And as I told him, I just don't have the same luxury he may himself feel he has to not stand and fight for my children. Because history is indeed watching. They're watching this moment. So there is things that can be done still.
Councilman Smith, I'll ask you, we've heard much today about what the will of the people might be, and I'm wondering what you're hearing from your constituents in Anne Arundel County. Are they saying this is what we want? What are they saying?
I mean, if you listen to the folks that are in the Democratic clubs and other organizations, I think there is a desire to not sit idle with our hands and do nothing. I've heard over certainly the last few years about Democrats standing up and doing more and with this battle, with this fight that's ahead of us. And so my general consensus is that yes, from the folks that have interacted with me, that they want us to actually do something to put brakes on what's happening in DC. And so this is an effort to do that. And I holistically support it. And I'm hoping that certainly our delegation does the right thing. But at the end of the day, this is about protecting not just what we have now, but also the future. We talk about young people and children that we are impacting. There's a bunch of pieces of legislation that is going through the House right now at the federal level that we don't have the ability to sort of really maneuver and put brakes on those until we do this thing. But more importantly, it's more about what's happening on the executive side of the House. They talked about the thousands of jobs that have been lost. We are in Anne Arundel County. We have a huge military infrastructure here in our county when it comes to jobs. Fort Meade, the U.S. Naval Academy, and so a lot of folks have lost their jobs, not because of Congress, but because of decisions that have been taking place out of the executive branch. And so to not have a Congress that can check that is what's putting us at risk. And I think it's important that leaders throughout the state and certainly throughout the country do something to curb the rash decisions that are being handed out of the executive branch that impact our quality of life and families and communities throughout this nation. And so that's what I'm hoping for. I just don't want to sit idle. I want us to do something. And I think other citizens are saying the same things.
I see you nodding, Dr. McRae.
Well, I agree with everything that's been said. I think it's time that we stop bringing, a knife to a gunfight. In 2013, we had Shelby v. Holder that ripped out the Voting Rights Act. Not enough said anything about it. Then we've had Citizens United. Billionaires got in place to put money up. Not enough was said about it. Now is the time, I believe, when everyday citizens need to say enough is enough. When you have a president and you have Congress just co-signing, that's allowing extortion on infrastructure projects for naming rights, it's going to hit our front door more than we ever believe. Too many of us will say, okay, that's just them. That's just Texas. That's just California. That's just Florida. Well, no, it's Maryland. And if we don't stand up now, when are we going to? The time is critical that we also, move. I wrote a Substack recently and I said, there's an African proverb that says, when you pray, move your feet. We have to start moving in a way collectively. If it's calling, if it's phone banking, if it's showing up, whatever is required on the local level, because it impacts us on the federal level. They say all politics is local, and it is. I'm sorry?
No, I thought you were done. So.
Yeah, I'm good. Go ahead.
Okay. Delegate Moon, I wonder if you had anything to add.
Sure. Thank you so much. Just one final thought I have on this is I would implore folks to stay on top of this issue, not just for now through November. I actually predict that this is going to be an issue that goes on and on beyond November. We in Maryland are in a short-term, part-time legislative session. So we go in and out from January to April. But when we clock out in April, Florida clocks into session and they're going to begin their redistricting process this April. The Supreme Court this June is taking a look at the Voting Rights Act. And when I say take a look, I think they're taking a look with a hatchet or a knife. And so be prepared for what's coming in June. And as I warned, if we go down that road, you have many states in the deep south that are waiting in the wings to redraw their congressional districts, starting with Louisiana, who is chomping at the bit for staying on top of this. But I do suggest that this problem is going to be with us for some time now.
I do have a question from Scott. He asks, could the General Assembly pass a new map as a constitutional amendment as a way of bypassing the courts? Obviously, it would delay everything, but would make the court risk essentially zero. Delegate,
it doesn't really work that way. Basically, we can pass a map, but not as an amendment. There are certain things we have to follow. This will always be considered a bill. Now we can have we can put it on as a ballot question, as Delegate Moon had said, whether we keep this map or not. But to amend to say we just have to keep this map, we still have laws that we have to follow. And as you well know, that even if we pass a bill out of both houses, it still has to be constitutional, both from our U.S. Constitution, Maryland Declaration of Rights, and our Maryland Constitution. So there's no specific way to avoid the courts, because remember, this is kind of why we're here, guys. We want that. We want that. The three different branches. We want that balance. We don't want it to where the House can do something and the courts are just stuck with it, even if it's unconstitutional, because that's kind of what's happening right now on the national level. So not only will we not stoop to that level, we invite any legal challenges, because at the end of the day, we know we're doing the right thing. As I said before, this is a principled argument where we have true moral clarity on this. So no, we can't do that, because we do have that checks and balances.
Steve?
Yes. You can hear me?
Yes.
Good. So I want to talk about Texas for a minute, just to show what's been happening elsewhere in the country that has led us to this point. In Texas, there are 8.1 million registered Democrats and 6.5 million registered Republicans. The Texas delegation in the House of Representatives, 38 seats, 26 were Republican, 12 were Democrat. So Texas is already gerrymandered to the hilt. How on earth do you have 1.6 million less registered voters in your party and have a 12-seat majority in your delegation? So there's a law of diminishing returns. And I think Delegate Wilson kind of pointed to that a little bit. We're going to make several of the seats more competitive. And honestly, I don't fear competition. I don't mind competition, because if there's competition, that makes the people who are in office or who want to be in office, it compels them to listen better to their constituents or potential constituents, and to govern according to the will of their constituents, as opposed to whatever they want to do. Because right now you have these districts that are gerrymandered so that basically, as long as you can protect yourself from your flank, if you're a Democrat, your left flank; if you're a Republican, your right flank, so that you can make it out of the primary, the general election is not competitive. You have districts that are D plus 10, R plus 15, so that there's no competition there. We need competition in the electoral process, which frankly a lot of our elected officials don't want, because they'll have to work harder.
So
Cry me a river. That will be what's better for we, the people, for the American people. And so we need to get to the point where we're creating districts that make sense, that might not be a guaranteed R or D, but at least it's competitive, and the residents of those districts will have to hear from both parties, because each of them have a realistic shot of getting elected.
Let's talk about that, because you have one Republican in the Maryland delegation.
Yes.
Why not compete on that level, right? And say we're gonna run a Democrat in your district and beat you, right? Instead of changing the district or gerrymandering.
Well, that's an R plus 10, at least R plus 10 district right now. And I'll tell you something. When I saw the map that Delegate Wilson prepared, I was like, oh my. It may or may not result in Andy Harris no longer being there. But now, because they want to grab Annapolis and part of Anne Arundel County in District 1, he doesn't have to lose, because now Sarah Elfreth, who is in Annapolis, she and Andy Harris will be running for the same seat. And while her portion of the district has a higher population, if you got the entire Eastern Shore, that's a competitive district. I can live with that. I can live with that. We don't have a state that has all Democrats and no Republicans. Texas is not a state that has all Republicans and no Democrats. But we, the people, have been asleep at the switch. The courts have let legislatures do what they want, and that's created this mess. And then to throw gas on the fire, you have this presidential misadministration that is saying, not only do we have gerrymandering, but I want it to be done mid-decade. That's a bridge way too far. And in fact, we need to be pushing in the other direction.
Are you concerned that you're just engaging in a race to the bottom?
Yes, yeah. Unfortunately, that is the case. But how do we stop that? Because there's what's the acronym in the military with respect to nuclear weapons? MAD, mutually assured destruction. And so the mutually assured destruction keeps Russia and China and the United States from coming at each other with the big guns, so to speak, because they know, well, if I blow you up, you're going to blow me up, and there's nothing left. I don't know what the MAD, the mutually assured destruction, would be in state legislatures. Maybe Delegate Moon seems to have gone up, but Delegate Wilson can speak to that, or maybe Councilman Smith as a legislator at the county level. I don't know what that looks like to get people to play nice, because if they don't, they might be messing themselves over.
Delegate Wilson.
One of the ways we can do that is, I believe that the Democrats have put forth, both under Trump and Biden, laws on the federal level to say that you can no longer do political gerrymandering. Now, not a single Republican has joined in on those bills, and of course they haven't gone anywhere. So to be very clear, if other states are concerned with this, but Maryland can't be the one that, it's called deterrence. This was something that I think Reagan used back with the Russians. And this is how, that only works if it's mutual. And right now they feel that they have the headwind. And so their principles that I don't know which ones they have at this point. They shoot them all. But their argument about being fair, it doesn't apply unless they're basically on the losing end. And as the Reverend said, the maps that I chose and that I defended in my name are not a guarantee. So again, there is no, until the entire country is ready to get in on this, there is no deterrence nor detente. There is just fighting. In some way, sometimes that's what you have to do. Now, do I personally think that Texas map's is going to work out on their behalf? I don't think so at all. They created 5 Hispanic districts down there, and they broke up 5 black districts. And I don't believe that they're going to get the same results that they got in this last presidential election. I think they'll be surprised. I think in a lot of districts, as we've seen with some of the smaller elections, including Texas state elections, where heavily red districts are now going blue because of what is happening in this country each and every day. So the fight continues. It's just Maryland's job to stay in the fight. That's what this bill is for. There's no deterrence and detente at this point until everybody is ready for peace. But they're not ready for peace. They want fight. They want war, and that's what we got to give them.
Councilman Smith.
Yeah, I just wanted to sort of respond to that question about the race to the bottom. And 2010-ish to 2014, 15, when Democrats had vacancies on the Supreme Court, we were trying to play by the rules and not do anything. And the Republicans, to their credit, held those seats vacant until the administration changed, or other mechanisms that they used to ensure that they had someone that they could appoint in those positions. And because we had that happen, we then now have a Supreme Court that started taking away women's rights. that started to take away educational rights and education funding by endorsing and/or allowing the executive branch to do what it is doing. And so I would say we've already been on this road, this race to the bottom. The question is, how do we get out of it? And we get out of it by standing up and doing and fighting for every single vote to make sure that our voices are heard across the country. And so I implore any folks that are listening to this, and certainly to the Delegate Wilson, they are, and the governor, they have this right. We have to stand up and be ourselves and be a part of this national conversation to ensure no other human rights are taken away from us by making sure we retain and or gain another vote to make sure that checks and balances there in the House.
Jennifer wants to know, and it's another question we've got in the comments section here, and anybody who has joined us, please, if you have questions or comments, please put them in the comments section. Jennifer says, any concerns that the Maryland Supreme Court is mostly Hogan appointees?
Again, there's always concerns. I've been a trial attorney for almost 25 years. There are always concerns. It's that risk analysis. You know, when is it time to fight? When is it time to take the risk? And if you think things are bad now, just wait till June. And I believe if the Senate does not pass this bill, each of those senators will regret this in June, because it's going to be so much worse. I've spent the entire year cataloging whatever Trump does as much as I can to kind of keep track when I'm talking. So when I'm talking to my Republican colleagues, I can point out with specificity the hypocrisy of their principled actions, i.e., their budgetary constraints versus the $1.5 trillion addition to our deficit. When they talk about, America first, but then we go into other countries and take their president. We talk about the Epstein files and then actually what happens with the Epstein files. So all I know is every day something new is going to come, because again, he floods the zone. And if you really want to see why, again, you have billionaires running our country. So he's made $1.5 billion so far. That's how much he has increased. That goes beyond the oil from Venezuela and why that's in a private account in Qatar, taking the Qatari planes, all the things that he's doing, because his job as a businessman is to make money, not for the business, but for himself. And that is all he's doing with our country. And so the more we're distracted, the more we don't talk about the Epstein files. In the meantime, he's taking away our civil rights. He's taking away rights of women. He's diminishing our military. He's diminishing our law enforcement. So at the end of the day, it's the risk analysis. And as I've said, this is my last term the last session of this term. What are we going to do? Because what I'm not going to do is sit here helpless, do nothing, and just hope that things work out, because that's not going to work. And as the council member said, we can just look when they have the power. They don't just use it, they abuse it. And this sense of normalcy is gone. So the days when we could just play fair, hoping they would come back around, we're long past that. And if you don't believe us, look at our Supreme Court and look at the way they held up the nominations till they could get who they want, because we don't play that game. And that's what everybody's asking us to do right now. Don't play their game. No, because I can play your game and beat you at it. And if you want to talk about a race to the bottom, I'll dig a tunnel, because at the end of the day, we're not going to keep being victims. And right now, by doing nothing, we're just being victims. We're hoping that Virginia, who did try, and unfortunately they ran into court, they ran into a court hurdle. And at the end of the day, if for some reason our courts do throw these maps back on us and say that they're unacceptable, I can still sleep at night, because I didn't stand silent and hope things got better. This is one of the few things that we can do to stand up to this administration. I refuse to let this opportunity go. And I hope the rest of Marylanders do understand and agree that we have to fight on every level.
So Delegate Wilson, let me ask you this question. If the Maryland Supreme Court were to strike down the redistricting that has been proposed, can we go over their head, around them, and go to the U.S. Supreme Court for their judgment on it? Or are we stuck with dealing with the Hogan court to try and get it through?
And again, I'll be very clear, is that because this is a state matter, how they interpret our state court or our state constitution most likely apply. So for some reason, they said political gerrymandering, they consider this political gerrymandering, number one. And two, that the Article 7 and Article 4 do apply to congressional maps, not just state maps. Then what we're left with is what we have. Like I said, there's no guaranteed victory here. but I just can't sit around and do nothing. That's why I spent months and months working on this. Like I said, this is not a political stunt. This is not about getting reelected. This was us doing the work of the people. And we're not here, like I said, I'm not here supporting any candidate, myself included, because my constituents most likely don't see this. I'm here to wake Marylanders up, and don't just wake up with this. Don't just call your senator. Watch the news. Pay attention. Write it down, because you're going to forget what he did. We're going to forget about that Obama thing within a week, because there's going to be a war somewhere. We almost went to war with NATO. We've all forgotten about that. It's because everything keeps happening, keeps flooding the zone, keeps us distracted with simple stuff. And at the end of the day, we all need to plug in to see where our country's going before we lose the country completely. And I don't mind taking that risk. And if the Supreme Court does what they feel they need to do, I can sleep at night knowing we fought the good fight.
Now, one thing I will say, I'm glad you're back on, Derek. One thing I will say to all of you, though, is this. The real elephant in the room is the public, is our constituents. And right now they're tuning out because they're sick of all of it, and all of us are pox on both of your houses. But as I tell potential constituents when I'm out campaigning, you're either at the table or on the menu. And so you need to find a way to pay attention and then to make your wills known to the people who want your vote. And then after they get in office, don't say, whoo, we got C.T. Wilson in there, we're good now. No. Now lean on C.T. Wilson for the next 4 years to do what you sent him there to do. Lean on Pete Smith when he becomes county executive in Anne Arundel County, so that for the next 4 years, he's doing what you sent him there to do. You can't just vote and go home. This needs to be public engagement as a contact sport and a participatory sport. Nobody gets to be in the stands. Now, one thing I will say, and then I'll yield to Democrats and Republicans. The largest voting bloc in the country, or the fastest growing, I should say, voting bloc in the country is independent voters. The number of registered Democrats are going down. The number of registered Republicans are going down. The number of unaffiliated or independents is going up. They're now almost a third of the electorate. And then if I bring in one of the key issues for me is poverty, that we always direct our campaigns toward the middle class. And so nobody ever talks to poor and struggling people. Well, according to the work that I was able to benefit from and receive when I worked with the Poor People's Campaign, the Maryland Poor People's Campaign, 41% of our fellow Americans, 140 million people, are poor and low wealth. I'm pretty sure that there is a huge overlap between that 41% and the 35 to 40% of Americans who don't even bother to vote. So we have to create an environment for all of them, red, blue, and everybody in between. Stop being so focused on color and label. Whose needs are we meeting, such that they feel they have a stake in the game, that they're being listened to, that policy is being directed toward them. And if we don't, we're going to get what we get.
This is a question from Rosalind, or a point she makes. She says, independent voters can't vote in the primary.
Yeah, about that. If I am fortunate enough to win the election, I can tell you one of the first bills I'm going to write. I'm going to propose in 2027. And here's the thing, Rosalind, even the so-called good guys, the Democrats, and let me say right here, Democrats think of themselves as the good guys and look at the Republicans as the devil, and vice versa. The voters look at all of us and like, all of y'all are full of it. Okay, so I don't see any, quote, good guys necessarily. Some of the policy Democrats do tends to be better for people, but our messaging gets lost with some of the other stuff. I'm not getting into all that. But we need to make voting available for everyone. If we have, Maryland is one of, I think, 9 to 12 states that still have closed primaries, which means you're either a Democrat or Republican, or you don't get to vote. Or if you're like Green Party, whatever their primary is. A lot of states have open primaries so that on election day, the voter can come to the precinct and say, I want a Democratic ballot. I want a Republican ballot. That's the kind of system we want, because then more people feel some engagement. A lot of people now are not feeling Democrats, they're not feeling Republicans. I get that. So if that's the case, we need to have an open primary so the voters, all voters, know they can come to the polls and they can choose which ballot they want to ask for.
I'm just wondering.
That'll make it harder for elected officials, and they don't like that. But it ain't about us. It's about we the people. It's about them.
What I want to ask our two elected officials what they think about that. Delegate Wilson.
I'm a very conservative Democrat. I've been my whole life. I grew up in the Midwest, so I understand that I'm not probably the best Democrat. Period. I'm not progressive. I am, a conservative Dem. My issue with that comes in the fact that I've watched the machinations where people will indeed, all they'll do is they'll vote for the weakest Democrat so they can have the Republican win. So I'm not saying that's not something I'm open to, but I do know the shortcomings, and I've seen them in other states where it's a conservative state, they'll make sure the weakest Democrat possible wins the primaries. So there's no competition in the general, and it's a very simple thing to do. And it's something that I think that this state has been, basically nervous about. I do understand that people are abandoning both parties. I totally understand. I'm not supportive of everything that we do as Democrats, but I also know that there are political ploys that are played when you have independents and they can vote in a primary, which all that means is I could be a closet Republican, but I'm going to vote for the weakest Democrat to make sure we have a Republican winning. There's always that. So again, I understand the thought process, but there are downsides to that.
Councilman Smith.
I'm simply going to say, as a Democrat, I'm proud of the brand that I have and the flag that I'm carrying. And I think as long as we are, when it comes to the general election here in Anne Arundel County specifically, and even in Maryland to some degree, what you've seen over the years is Anne Arundel is a perfect sort of county to sort of illustrate, as long as we have a strong message, as long as we got good candidates, the independents will certainly decide the fate in this county. There are 173,000 registered Democrats in Anne Arundel County, roughly 130,000 registered Republicans, and about 110,000 registered unaffiliated voters in Anne Arundel County. And over the last few elections in this specific county, you cannot win a countywide race with your Democratic votes alone. You need other votes. Stuart Pittman in 2022, for example, had roughly 118,000 votes, but only 88,000 of them were Democrats. And so he won because there were unaffiliated voters or Republicans who voted for him in the general election. And I say that to say, when it comes to the tone of our county specifically, because it really is a good bellwether of what's happening nationally and certainly in the state. But from a national standpoint, those independent voters have leaned on the Democratic side of the house as far as how they've been voting in countywide races. And so we obviously appeal, or they are, I should say, they are certainly frustrated with things that are happening at the federal level, which is why they have consistently over the last 10 years have been leaning towards Democrats. And so I think they have been a good test for us as a state and certainly as a nation to determine whether or not what's happening at the federal level, whether or not it's something that's good for our democracy or not. And I can tell you that those independent voters have been leaning towards us to provide that pathway forward. So whether or not the state continues to support closed primaries or open primaries, I'll leave that up to the delegates and the senators who are debating on that process. But I can tell you in this county, we have been consistently putting together candidates who speak with a level of authenticity and knowledge. And the independents have certainly been co-signing with that, with putting Democrats in office throughout Anne Arundel County. So that's a fact.
Okay.
And Derek, what I would simply say is we have to be about policy and not ideology. If we focus on policy and meeting the needs of our constituents, that should carry the day. Whether primaries are open or closed, if we're meeting the needs of constituents and communicating that to them, then it'll be up to the people to decide. Well, County Executive Smith handled business for our community in this way, that way, the other way. I'm going to support him. I appreciate what Delegate Wilson did on this matter. I'm going to support him. I disagreed with what Senator Tillett did on this issue. I'm going to fire him the next election. That's their right. They get to do that. But we need to be a whole lot more about policy
and a lot less about ideology.
Dr. McRae?
Yeah, I think another thing that we can no longer afford to discount are the third of people who didn't bother to vote in 24. We did an analysis across even the state of Maryland, and that's about the same number per county as well, too, collectively. And that's an unspoken, but speaking very loudly, constituency that we have to get to as well, too. A number of, whether they be Democrat, Republican, but just citizens have checked out of the voting process. And that's who we have to get to as well, too. So they understand the importance of voting their interests. They understand the importance of school board meetings and how it affects their children, senior citizens centers, and how local electors and officials directly impact them. There's a whole, I believe, civic education that needs to take place as well, too, so people clearly understand why certain issues are important, how they affect them, and what they can do about them as well.
All right, thank you, Karen. I'm just wondering, down the road, does it increase voter cynicism if we do, you say, well, they're doing it, so we have to do it. Well, the voters look at that and go, well, you're both evil. You're both doing playing the same games, doing the same tricks, and trying to rig the vote in your favor. Don't you? Is that a possibility?
It's always a possibility. Again, I am. This is not something that I do not proudly. I do it very proudly, but it's not something we do without reservation, which is why we did amend the bill to make sure that this went to the voters, because this isn't just about voter cynicism. This is about our democracy. And if our voters reject this map and say, you know what, guys, that's too partisan. 2028, we'll go back to the 7-1 map. I'm fine with that. This is being done, number one, to show that we are fighters and to fight, and to send that message to our constituents that we're willing to fight for them. There's, always going to be voter cynicism. And I do understand, but if you were to pay attention to what's going on nationally, you cannot expect me to sit with my feet flat and do nothing. And if you do, I'm just not your candidate. I got that. And maybe you're not going to engage. I get that too. That is not how it was built. I grew up in foster care. The only reason I'm here is because I'm a fighter. And I don't wait for other people to do things for me. I do them for myself. And I think as Marylanders, we have a lot of people that are very successful because of their hard work, and they understand the need to stand up and fight for something and fall for everything. I'm not going to be that person, which is why that I sponsored this bill. I understand the cynicism. I understand people saying we need to take the high road. There's no road left. Okay, you can't talk about playing fair if they've broken the chessboard. All you can talk about at some point is recognizing where we are right now. Where we are is we're at a turning point in our nation's history. In one direction leads us to just total plutocracy, where billionaires and people that run tech industries and the social media will run our nation. Or will the people have a say? The goal is to let the people know that they have a say. Like I said, that's why we put it to the vote. Because if you don't believe what we're doing is right, you have a chance to speak up. But in the meantime, we have a larger demon to fight, and that is there in that tyrannical administration that we're dealing with daily. And I don't believe any Marylander has gone unscathed by it. And if they haven't, just wait a minute. Like I tell everybody, if you don't feel me now, you'll feel me soon. And some people only get engaged when they start hurting and bleeding. The problem with this administration, everybody's going to bleed by the time this is over with. So we need to do something now to staunch the bleeding.
Dr. McRae, I see you nodding.
Simply, I agree with everything Delegate Wilson is saying. As Derek and Steve may know, I'm originally from Jersey. I live and meeting them where they are. So, it's not just digging a tunnel, it's also digging a tunnel, digging yourself out. Fight. You don't stop fighting. I think too many of us, okay, let them get that, and we just get to be complacent. The time is to move now, with an urgency of what is at stake. And if we don't communicate that, who will? Who will? If you're going to fight me on Monday, I'm going to fight you on Thursday. We have to be consistent about what we're dealing with in this fight. And HB 488 is a way to get there, but it's not the end of the game.
What's the end of the game?
Going forward. I'm sorry.
What's the next step after HB 488? What's the next step? You said it's not the end of the game. What's the next step?
I think the next step is staying engaged, keeping your head on a swivel politically about what's coming, what could come next. We cannot afford, once we make sure this with what other delegates and senators are doing going forward, so that we make sure that our issues, our persons, our communities are engaged in, because we're impacted. And like Delegate Wilson said, it may not hit us now, but it'll hit us later. When we have almost 8% of Black women now who are affected by unemployment, most of whom are federal employees, a third of them are single mothers. All of this impacts in a way that we cannot ignore. So yeah, this is one phase. The next phase at all areas and aspects, because this is too much is at stake.
We have to connect the dots, Derek. We need to connect the dots so people understand why this matters to me, how this is going to affect me, how my ox is going to be the one that gets gored here. And so I can either focus on my needs, or I can focus on the distractions, who's performing at the Super Bowl and who's mad, who's zooming who and who's mad about it, all of that. Or I can focus on my needs. What food costs for me, how much it costs me to feed my family, how much it costs when I have to fill up my tank, whether I can get fair jurisprudence in the courts and the criminal legal system. Things that affect everyday Americans, everyday Marylanders, everyday Anne Arundel Countyans. We need to focus on that, and they need to participate in their own governance. It's not a spectator sport, and if they don't, then I won't say they shouldn't complain, because they will. But it's like, well, where were you when your fate was being decided? We need you to come out of the stands and get in the game with us, even if you don't want to run for office. And God knows we understand why most people don't want to. And the Lord bless and hopefully direct those who do. But we need for the people to be active and engaged and hold us accountable.
Right.
And that's why we've asked for people to call the chair of the Senate Rules Committee, Senator Katie Fry Hester, and her number is 410-841-3671. Senator Katie Fry Hester, 410-841-3651, to let her know, 3671, I'm sorry, I can't even read my own writing, 3671, to make sure that she knows that the people are paying attention and they're not satisfied with an issue of local and national importance not even being discussed. And one person shouldn't get to say, I don't want to talk about it, so nobody gets to talk about it. And folks in the Senate, you know me, I keep it 100. Folks in the Senate need to grow up here and tell them, this is going to come to the floor. We'll discuss it. We'll hear from everybody. We'll take a vote up or down, one way or the other.
I know Delegate Wilson has to get ready to go.
Right.
He's got a leadership meeting, but I want to give him a chance to just sort of close it out, since he's the man who's got the bill and everything like that.
Again, thank you guys very much. I would ask anybody that does call anyone, please be respectful. Okay. I'll just be honest. I don't respond well to threats and cursing. I laugh it off and say, you can always come meet me outside the house. We can resolve this, because I don't like keyboard warriors or people that are cowards behind a phone. So I ask anybody who has serious intent, because I'm not going to question the principles of any senator who doesn't support this bill. In fact, that don't bother me. All right. You have a right to express yourself, and they have a right to express themselves too. So I would ask them to be respectful, especially with our Senate president, because I know that he's doing what he thinks is the right thing to do, even though he and I disagree on this. This is not about attacking somebody personally or using this as a political, launching point. This is about our healthcare system. If you look at like you've heard, look what's going on with our colleges, and they're not being funded anymore. The amount of money that is being taken away from blue states. We don't even want to talk about environment. We don't want to talk about all the things that are going on to set us back generations. Our military soldiers. Their social media accounts are being scoured to see if they said something bad about Charlie Kirk. Our First Amendment rights are being challenged. If you're listening today and don't believe this applies to you, I would ask you to pay attention, because it absolutely does. And again, this is a turning point in our history, and history is watching what we do, not just as a nation, but as a state. Everybody needs to take up arms and be ready to fight. And I don't mean in a physical way for anybody listening who's going to report me. I mean that we need to fight with our pens and our pencils, with our keyboards, with our phones, and with our intellect. But see, if you're misinformed, if you haven't been paying attention, you're going to come in half-assed, and you're not going to do it the right way, and your message is not going to be heard. So educate yourselves. Fight, because understand what we're fighting for. And if you can't do it for you or your children, please, God, do it for mine, because they deserve a better future than the one that we are currently heading towards. Thank you guys very much for the time, and God bless everyone.
Thank you, Delegate. That's perfect. I think that's a good note. Steve, you wanted to say something? Okay, I think that's a good a note as any to end this. And I really appreciate everybody for joining us for the conversation. I know you're all very busy people, and we really needed to do this. And I have to be honest, I think you changed my mind on this.
Very good, very good. Well, just a reminder to folks, and again, as Delegate Wilson said, be respectful. You know, calling folk up, calling them out of their name, that doesn't accomplish anything. If anything, you might turn them away from the position you'd like for them to have. But just let Senator Hester know, let Senator Ferguson know, have this bill come out of the Rules Committee so that it can be debated on the floor and voted up or down, and the chips will fall where they may. Again, Senator Hester, Chair of the Rules Committee, 410-841-3671. Senator Ferguson, President of the Senate, 410-841-3600. Your citizens, they work for you. And even though Senator Ferguson is from Baltimore, since he's the President of the Senate, he works for all of y'all, the whole state. Call him. She's the chair of the committee. She represents Montgomery County, but she also, as the chair of a committee that has a statewide effect, works for all y'all. Call them. Tell them what you need done, what you want for them to do. This is supposed to be a democracy. Let's act like it. Have it on the floor. Talk about it. Debate it. Vote for it. Up or down. And it'll be what it'll be.
And on that note, we'll say goodbye. I want to thank again everybody for joining us.
Thank you. Appreciate you.